This program is offered by the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center, a national landmark in East Hampton. And we are co-hosting this program with the New York Equity Association and Equity Gallery. I'm actually doing this program remotely from my studio in East Hampton. My name is Joyce Raimondo. I'm the education coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. And I also happen to be one of the artists who was gratefully included in this show at the Equity Gallery called Shifting Balances. So tonight we're going to focus on a very special program. It's a residency program that invites curators, in this case artists who became curators, to collaborate to put together an exhibition in this historic gallery. So to start, I thought it would be nice to contemplate what do we mean by equity, and also in thinking about what equity is, I was contemplating what advantages did I have in my own life because of the incredible institutions that fostered my creativity and my career as an artist. Okay, so but we're going to go back in time and just quickly look at the historic era of Pollock and Krasner. And this is just going to be super brief to allow time to focus on Equity Gallery. So this is the logo for the New York Artists Equity Association. And when we say equity, what do we mean? How is it different than equality? It's equality, equity of treatment, fairness. Now, how does this pertain to the arts? Of course, the arts is not excluded from society as a whole. So whenever inequities exist in society, they're going to, of course, be expressed in the arts as well. So Pollock and Krasner were coming of age in New York City in the 1930s, and they both participated in the WPA mural program. This program is one of the best examples of creating equity in the arts, especially during that era. The WPA project hired artists to create murals, and here you see one by Pollock and one by Krasner, who were employed by the WPA full-time. And Lee Krasner always said that there were equal wages for men and women. And because she was so grateful for the opportunity to participate in the WPA, she later created a foundation to help artists, which was inspired in part by this program. Now, by the way, recently someone said, well, there was a little disparity between the wages of men and women, but according to Lee, she didn't perceive it that way. So the period, the heyday of abstract expressionism was in the 40s and 50s. And this was a new kind of art. It was groundbreaking. It sprung up in New York City and later on the East End. And we also can think about inequity when it comes to not just race and economic disparity and gender, but also what actual kinds of art get represented in galleries, what style of art gets represented in a museum. So at that time, this abstract expressionism was left out of the Metropolitan Museum of Art show about American painting. And so the artists got together and formed a group. They were called the Irascibles, and they wrote a letter to protest that inequity. Life magazine picked up on the story and took this photo, and it's very obvious that they left out almost all the women and also people of color. So as the fame of the abstract expressionists rose and big money came into play, the people of color, Hispanic people, African-American people, and women were really left out of gallery representation for the most part. They were also written out of history. And anyone that's old enough will know that you read Jansen's History of Art in the 70s or 80s, and there was one woman in the whole book, okay? Now, Peggy Guggenheim is an example of a woman who was creating equity by supporting these artists who created avant-garde, groundbreaking art. Pollock became, of course, the front runner and the most famous of that group. And she gave Pollock a stipend so he could work on his art, and also lent them money so they could move to the East End. Also really interesting is Betty Parsons, who represented Pollock. Betty Parsons forged ahead representing the LGBTQ community at a time when artists had to not only hide their sexuality, but also would have been completely shut out of the gallery system had they come forward and said that they were either lesbian or gay. So with this in mind, Lee Krasner is one of my biggest heroes, because not only is she an amazing artist, she took her wealth, the entire estate of Jackson Pollock, which she inherited, and she formed the Pollock Krasner Foundation, which gives grants to artists. You can go to pkf.org to apply for a grant. This is separate from the museum, which she arranged would become a museum under Stony Brook University before her death, totally separate. That's pkhouse.org, which you can go on and you can visit. It's a study center. It's an amazing historic site that really is alive today with, it brings the history of art alive on the East End of Long Island. So that's just a very quick overview of some of my thoughts about equity as it pertains to Pollock and Krasner. Of course, this is a very deep subject. And so, of course, that was like just a little quick overview. So I hope you enjoyed it. And now I'm really, really thrilled to introduce Michael Gormley, who's the director of the Equity Gallery. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the history and the current show. Okay.
Hi, my name is Michael Gormley, and I'm the executive director of the New York Artists Equity Association and Equity Gallery. Thank you so much, Joyce, for that great lead on the history of the Pollock Krasner Foundation. And I love that it talked about the WPA, because that really dovetails right in with New York Artists Equity Association, because that was founded as the WPA closed. And the artists that had been engaged with the WPA, among them Jacob Lawrence and Gwendolyn Knight, two of our biggest founders, Edward Hoppe, Louise Nevelson, amazing Kobayashi, amazing group of post-war artists banded together for the same reason, to safeguard the professional advancement and economic interests of artists. It's important to note at this time that American art was still, no matter what the genre, whether it was figurative or abstract, was not big on collectors' lists. They were still going to Europe and buying European work, or having European work imported into the galleries. So American artists were still very much at this point struggling. So the association got together, and the idea was that artists that were doing okay, as Pollock did and Krasner did, felt they were best positioned to help emerging artists, and especially artists from underserved or underrepresented communities. And Joyce has already mentioned artists of color, women in particular, and artists emerging, not meaning those just coming out of school. Artists can emerge at all points in their career. So again, we just celebrated our 75th anniversary. So how the Equity New York Artists Association fulfills that mission, that mandate. Originally, it felt right away it should open a gallery. So it did originally have a gallery on the west side on 10th Street, where the galleries were at that point, post-war, and then moved to Soho. There was a space in Soho during the 80s into the 90s. And then we landed in the Lower East Side about 10 years ago. And that is a primary driver of how we support the professional advancement of artists. We also have, we do lectures, we do symposiums, residencies, and this residency now, the one we're going to talk about tonight, I'm going to let Luciana Solana talk more about that in depth. Luciana is on our board, a trusted trustee, because one of the benefits of being a member of Artist Equity is you get the opportunity to curate shows. And that is a very engaged, involved process. And we felt that it needed support, so our members would take up that benefit. And so in talking with the board, we came up with this idea that we should run a residency to let artists take that power, right? It's empowering to curate your own exhibitions. Why sit around and wait for somebody else to do it for you? Do it yourselves. So I'm just going to show a lovely video of the current residency that Luciana and Haley Ferber were the lead curators on that. So you can kind of, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and we're all artists and we love to look at images. And you can also take a look at the gallery. It's a beautiful jewel space. Again, it's on the Lower East Side on Broome Street between Ludlow and Orchard. So it's really in the center of that whole scene. And I also invite you to go to Equity and look at our website. We have a very active marketplace, which also gives artists an opportunity to show their work. Luciana and I and a team of the board, we built that website, I think 3 years ago. It's been very successful. And we're in the process of launching another website. It will open in the spring that will really sort of center more on the market and sort of have an adjacent website for our members. So we're expanding onto, because you need to, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff happening in the digital sphere, and we want to be a part of that. This is a nice walkthrough through the space. I will be showing some images later on during the talk, so you can get to see them a little bit more. Full details, give you an idea of the installation. Equity, by the way, just got a capital improvement grant from NISCA, and we redid the gallery over the summer. And again, I invite you to come down and take a look. It looks really spectacular. Look at that tight curating, huh? Isn't that wonderful? How it all is going together? Great work, guys. Amazing. Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to stop, share. There you go. Okay, thanks so much. And I can't get this thing to stop, but maybe you'll just.
I'm going to remove your spotlight. Michael, thank you so much. And there was so much richness in what you said about not only creating equity, but all of the artists who achieved success, and then it was a give back, right? So that's a really good reminder. So we are very honored to hear from Luciana Solano, who is one of the lead curators. So Luciano, can you explain a little bit about how the program works and a little bit about yourself and your interests in the program?
Thank you, Joyce. As Michael said, I'm a trustee at Equity. And the idea was that we could empower our members and also people who answered for an open call that we put together to be able to give this opportunity for people to do high-end exhibitions. So we started in June in person, and then we went online. So we first met each other in the space, and then we went online and we spent the entire summer together. And in the first week of September, in parallel to the art fairs, we had the opening of the show that is ultimately the result of this engagement of 10 artists curating a show together. And I think the important thing about what's going on in the world now, where we are starting to understand that we need multiple views and perspectives, is what allowed us to come up with this workshop. Haley and I, we did a show in the beginning of the pandemic with Michael and also Priska Juska who is also a Lower East Side art director. And we thought that went well, the four of us, who are completely different people with different ideas and interests. But the show kind of regulates itself if we are working for the relationships between the works and not our own ideas or visions, which is kind of outdated concept at this point. We just need to be able to collaborate and understand that some great ideas do not apply in certain moments and projects. And that's exactly what we did throughout this 2.5 months when we were together trying to understand what was being created and not very certain up until the show was up. I believe most of it was the relationships were there online, but the moment that it took the final form, I believe there were still surprises for us to understand how powerful the engagement of 10 people who had different ideas could bring us to such a different, beautiful space. So I think this is, it's very easy to talk about the concepts of getting a little out of our ego sides and collaborating and cooperating and all these ideas, but to work in these terms was at times quite difficult. So I would like to give my microphone back to you, Joyce, and we can hear more about this from the curators who participated.
Thank you so much, Luciana. And it is so true that the arts are just a wonderful way of practicing unity and diversity, right, in a civil manner. But we'll get to that later. Maybe it wasn't so civil. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. So we do have Haley Ferber, who is the other leader of the curatorial program. And Haley, would you like to come on and say a few words? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm still at work, but I popped on a little early, and thank you for joining us this evening. This is the second, as Luciana said, the second one of these curatorial cohorts that we've worked with, and it's always really interesting to see how different the exhibitions end up. They're like night and day, and it really just depends on the curators and the artists that they're bringing in. And our role is really just to kind of guide the process and let them make the choices. So it's always interesting to see how it ends up. Last time we had a group of 7, this time we had a group of 10, so it was a larger group to work with, but everyone was, you know, always very respectful of each other's opinions and preferences. And yeah, that is kind of all I'll say about it. But thank you. And, you know, it was a pleasure working with everyone. And I look forward to, you know, hearing the rest of the talk.
Haley, on a practical note, if someone's watching this program and they want to apply to be in the program, can you tell us how they would go about that and when the deadline is?
Yeah, we don't have another one set up yet. We haven't had a conversation about, you know, what the next round of this will look like. I don't imagine it happening so fast. You know, this is my kind of my first day at this new job, so it's going to take a little time to kind of get the swing of things. But you know, if you're interested, I encourage you to reach out to Equity Gallery, to email Michael at Equity, so that you can let him know that you're interested, and we can kind of start to keep a list in mind, and we'll follow up when we have more information that we're ready to share.
Okay, great. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you all.
It was so nice meeting all of these wonderful people in person at the opening. So now we have Eileen Hoffman, who generously put together a PowerPoint presentation of the artworks. And Eileen is one of the curators, and she is also an artist in her own right. So Eileen, would you like to do a screen share of the works that were chosen? Great. And we agreed that we're not going to talk over the presentation. Eileen is just going to breeze through them. Is that it, Eileen? Okay, thank you so much. And I love that it was a really great experience just viewing the artwork without talking. And thank you so much, Eileen, for putting that together. So I am inviting right now the 10 curators. I don't know if everybody's on the Zoom, but for those people who were curators, who are also artists, we have some interesting questions about the process. So why did you want to curate a show? Being that all of you, I'm sure, are very busy people who are also artists. So is there anyone who would like to raise your hand and speak to that? What motivated you? If you want to, you could either just put your hand like this or just put a little icon in the reactions button. And if nobody answers, you know what I'm going to do. I might call on someone. So Beth, would you like to speak to that? Beth Barry? What made you? Oh, I see. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
2 participants raised their hand.
We
Okay.
have a
Beth,
little
and then,
hands up.
yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has just been a very interesting experience. Thank you, Joyce, for putting this together. Thank you, everyone who was involved with Equity, Michael, Luciana, and Haley. I really wanted to do this because I really like collaboration. That for me was the most exciting part of wanting to be involved in the curatorial process. The idea of bringing what seemingly are disparate voices and artwork together to create a cohesive experience with the experience itself and the artwork. That was what brought me to do that.
Okay, good. Anyone else want to speak to that? Oh, Fran, nice to see Fran. How do you pronounce your last name, Fran?
Fran Beeler.
Bela, and Fran also has an amazing exhibit up in New York City right now. So yeah,
Thank you.
go ahead.
I have been a member of a wonderful downtown arts organization called the New York Artist Circle for some 25 years now. And over the last 6 or 7 years, I've been a co-leader of that organization. And as such, part of our mission and part of my goal overall is to make the business of art among artists a more collaborative process. And so part of my personal mission is not just to get my own work seen, it's also to get other artists' work out there and seen. And therefore, I have been very interested in a while for curating as a whole separate art form and business, and something that artists can do with each other, for each other. It's a process that helps to educate the broader public about art and get the art out there in the world and seen. So this seemed like a really great way to, as Beth said, work in collaboration. That was really exciting. And to get mentored by 2 experienced curators in a great space at Equity Gallery. And, you know, I thought it would be a wonderful experience, and actually it was. So all in all, a good thing. Thanks.
Fran, thank you so much. And Eileen, would you like to weigh in on this and add anything?
Well, I also work with Fran closely at the New York Artist Circle. So I feel like she spoke a lot for me, very articulately. And I'm on the committee with the website that helps get the curated shows online and I help curate them. And it's been so interesting to see what goes on behind the scenes in thinking about and curating a show. I wanted to learn more about it and get smarter about it, and this seemed the perfect place to do it, which it was. And also as an artist, you know, I've been on the artist end. It's so interesting. I thought it would be, but particularly with this group, to see the other end of it, deciding which pieces get into the show and, where to hang them, and think about all of the pieces of an exhibition. We take it so personally, we take the rejection so personally, and so it's really to be on the other side of it and see how much of it has nothing to do with you, but with a bigger group. And also in expanding my community seems important. As an artist, your community is really the most important thing. So I like to do things that develop and expand that, and I feel like this did. It was great.
Eileen, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I do a program through the Pollock House called Cultivating Community, and really debunking that myth of the lone, sad, lonely artist. No artist achieves greatness in isolation. Everything is about community. Now, I do see Lois has your hand up, but I want to go to the next question so we can weave in some of these ideas. How did each curator choose an artist? So did you have a criteria? How did that come about? Lois, will you speak to that one and anything else?
For sure. Well, it's exciting to see the variety of art. I mean, beyond my own area of interest, I love seeing diversity in art. And I was looking at the artists, and I chose artwork for the exuberance of style and craft. And the two artists, Pollock Krasner and Alice Harrison, seemed to have that wonderful sense of the craft. And it was just, the work was beautiful. And so that was exciting to watch the different aesthetics and tastes of every different one of the curators. So it was a lot of fun to bring that into view in a combination beyond my own vision. So my criteria was aesthetic exuberance and style and craft.
Mm-hmm. And piggybacking to this question, is none of the artists chose their own work? Now, was that a decision that was made from the beginning? Lois, you want to speak to that?
Yes, of course. We wanted to focus on a selection of others, and our own work would get kind of in the way of a sense of the purity of working with other artists. We didn't want our own sense of self-interest involved. And I guess there are some shows where curators put their work in. It's all and on an individual basis. But there were a lot of us, so it would take up a lot of room if 10 of us had our artwork in it. So, but the exercise was learning how to curate with other art, other than our own art.
Okay, thank you, Lois. And who else would like to discuss did somebody have a different criteria? Kristen Reed, artist curator.
I, like most of us artists here in New York, go around and see a lot of other shows. And there are some artists that I've seen in shows that I wish I knew, and I love their work, and I wish I could have contact with them. So what I did with this opportunity was contact people that I didn't know or didn't know well. And that was like really exciting for me to contact, like people from other states and just give them a chance to show in New York. Some of them, have been shown a lot elsewhere. And I know that a lot of people just chose artists that they know and would like to see in the show. And that was another way to do it.
So how did you find the artists? Because this is a good practical question for any artist on the call. How did you find them?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, so I had seen some shows with work that I was really excited about, and I just contacted them through their Instagram or email, or if I could get their email. I just contacted them out of the blue and said what I was looking for, what I was doing, and asked them if they'd be interested. And every one of 4 artists was interested. And my favorite artist that I was so excited about got knocked out on the first round.
Okay, so that will lead us to our next question, and we could come back, and I see there's a question, and we're going to circle back around these ideas. Okay, so now you have a group of artists, curators, 10, which is a lot. And then each person perhaps has an idea of maybe people they're considering. So then what happens? How did the group, did you create connections? Did you create a theme? Then you have 10, how did you go about this? 10 different curators. That's quite a large group. So who would like to speak to that? And you could just unmute because I'm having a hard time seeing the hands raised. Anyone?
How did we go about doing that? It was like, boom, boom, boom. I like this artwork. I don't like this artwork. I like this. I don't like this. It was very, very challenging because we had to do it on Zoom. So the artwork was shown in slides kind of quickly, and we went through, we had an acceptance pile, a rejection pile, and a maybe pile. And then we just kept going through them over and over again until we kind of pared it down to work that we all felt okay enough about. It was very challenging because people were rejected right from the start. And I think that had to be that way. And it worked out, I think it worked out fine, but some people had more artists than other people did. Some people had artists who had more artwork than other people did. So it wasn't kind of, it didn't need to be equal in that way, and it wasn't, but it was challenging. It was certainly challenging.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. Who else would like to speak about that?
I could say, I mean, some of us, a group of us knew each other already from the New York Artist Circle, which was helpful because we didn't really all know each other, I think, but I think at the end, if there was a debate, we were voting, and that was helpful. But it was also really interesting because people had such different views about things. So I found that really interesting to hear how differently people thought, and it made me look at the work differently, and I really enjoyed that. And there were a few pieces that the curator fought for, and then we re-thought about it. And I, at the end, didn't feel any, how do I say it, hard feelings like, oh, why was that rejected, or this is in the show and it shouldn't be. I mean, I personally felt it was all a great selection at the end. So there were a few of us who were like peacekeepers when things started heating up, and that was helpful.
This is really interesting because I used to do a project with students where they would collaborate, and then I would ask them, well, what happened if you had conflict? And there are techniques, right? You could take a vote, you could assign someone as a leader. There are specific techniques that you can do to resolve conflict. So now, okay, so you have your artworks, and then did you create a theme, a title? How did that come about? Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak who would like to weigh in? You can just unmute and speak. Anyone? Otherwise, we'll circle back around.
If no one else is speaking, I could speak to that. Yeah, so that actually was a very interesting part of the process, the choosing of the theme, and it took us a while, actually. So each of us, we had a Google Doc, and each of us came up with a number of themes. And so it was funny week to week how we would all love one theme, but then maybe one or two people wouldn't like it so much, and they'd talk about why, and then we'd all pull back and say, maybe not. And we kept circling around and thinking we had it, and then changing it. And it was a really interesting, fluid process, and a real nice, sometimes challenging, but overall really good collaboration, where sometimes at moments you feel like, I really like this theme, but then it gets pushed aside, and then something else comes in, you say, right, I can live with this one too. And so it's funny because the final title and theme of shifting balance, it actually describes that process of the balance shifting from theme to theme and idea to idea. And then we actually even collaborated on our statement. So we wrote something together. We each wrote pieces, we put them together, we edited it. Worked out really well. I was impressed how we could take 10 people with different points of view and put that all together.
I think this group should go to Congress, please. No, you really, you're like, all of these, you're all exemplary. This is all exemplary. This
We're
is,
the diplomats.
this is really exemplary of the way people can really honor each other and listen to viewpoints. Really, it's inspiring. So on a practical note-
Joyce, can I make a comment on that? Because
Yeah.
when I was saying it's very easy to describe certain ways of working and ethics, but hard to put it in place. I think the show was highly political, and there was a moment where we even mentioned that. We said, these are choices here that we're doing that are really hard. And but it's okay if we are okay that we're looking into something bigger, and that we allow it to put itself together over some time and some compromise. Haley and I kept on saying, you have to trust it's going to be good, because at certain points it really wasn't. But we knew, because we've done that before, that we had experience on that. We knew it would take a certain shape. So I'm glad to hear the feedbacks tonight.
Well,
I
it's
would like
also
to add a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Another technique that I found interesting is that Haley and Luciana asked us to form keywords about the qualities and the characteristics about each artwork, so that you could derive some feelings from the multitude of artworks. I mean, we looked at 30 artworks and we're trying to put them together. And those keywords kind of like worked for us. They kind of like help us find the kind of aggregate of more of one kind of feeling. And that's how we could come up with the shifting and the imbalance and the off balance. So we played, it was a lot of wordplay. And it was a really interesting dialogue to come up with the coalescing theme and the title. So it was a very good technique. I liked it.
Yeah, thank you, Lois. And that is really, that's an example of, like, if any teachers are out there, right? You could write a list of these techniques, or even in a corporation, these specific techniques to get people to listen to each other. So thank you. And is there anyone else who would like to speak about the title? If not, we'll move on to the actual image of the postcard is really provocative. I wonder if anyone could speak about how you chose that postcard image out of all the numerous artworks. Kristen?
Yeah, that was what they described as a hero image. And we had selected several that we thought were possible. But by the time we came up with what the title of the show was, you know, the headline of the show, it became pretty obvious that that piece was indicative of shifting balance. And so everybody pretty much agreed on it. And one other thing that I'd just like to mention is that we had selected this, I don't know how many pieces it is, I think Lois said 30, something like that. And we're looking at this big list of artworks with a little thumbnail of each one. And I'm looking at them thinking, how is all that going to fit into the gallery? You know, it's not a small gallery, but it's not large. And we got there to arrange everything and decide what the order of everything would be. And the work had been delivered and it was all unwrapped. And it all fit in the front room. And there were like 2 other rooms in a hallway that we could use. So nothing looked like it did in Zoom. Everything was a different size than it appeared in Zoom, and the colors were different. And it just looked like a different show to me. When I came in there, I was like, whoa. But it wasn't a bad thing. It was actually turned out to be a really good thing. We had plenty of work, but it wasn't too much.
I mean, it's really the magic of all of it, because we all had to apply and have a curatorial proposal to apply to the residency. So we all had different ideas and different themes and different artists that we were selecting. So that, you know, from the get-go, everything was very, very different. And there's something, I guess, about the inherent value of all of the art we selected. All the art was really good, even if we didn't really like it. And we maybe have dismissed it because it didn't work thematically with everything else. There was something about the work that really had enough gravitas to kind of work as a unit. But it really was a kind of magical thing and that is, I think,
became magical in person. When it was in
when we
person,
put it
that's when
together.
it became magical.
It was really, it's an amazing thing that there is a process that's not conscious. It's a collaborative, creative process of putting everything together that makes it all work. And that was really cool. That was.
Thank you. Yeah. And sometimes it can be an intuitive process as well, right?
It's partially that, yeah.
And Kristen, it is interesting when you curate a show, there is it's a physical aspect to it of, you know, how large is the piece? What are you going to put it next to? How do people walk by it? Who's in the back? Who's in the front? So would anyone like to speak to the idea, once you had all these artworks, how did 10 people decide really where everything's going to go? Maybe somebody else who hasn't had a chance also would like to weigh in on this. Anyone?
Sunny, it's Sunny and Barbara.
Sunny.
Go ahead, Sunny.
Hey, I'm Sunny. Hi, everyone. That part was really, I think, the least difficult part, because once we saw all the work in person, it really was easy to move things around and figure out where they would work best. We had to deal with some little problems, like there were a couple pieces that were a different size than they were supposed to be because they had been framed. And we decided to take them out of the frames and just put them on the wall with magnets, and that worked very well. There was a piece that came in with a dirty mat, and we got together with erasers and cleaned it up as it, you know, and that's just how collaborative the process was, is that I worked on somebody else's artist piece to help that artist stay in the show. Even though it wasn't a piece that I picked out, we supported each other's artists. You know, and that goes back to the whole curation process where, you know, we had to be both flexible and nimble in curating. Like one artist I brought in, everyone liked her piece, but decided it was too big. So I called her and I said, Carly, do you have more winter scenes that are smaller, you know? And we ended up putting both of them into the show. So, you know, it was an interesting experience for me all around, because I'm not used to collaborating. This is good for me because I'm the boss and I decide what happens. You know, I'm a landlady, I'm a business owner. I have a gallery that I curate by myself. And so working with a group was really different. And I also, going back to the theme and how the theme developed, I'd never done anything like that before. With my shows, I choose a theme and then I pick artists and ask them for work that fits the theme. So the idea of creating a theme just as you go, I thought that was completely nuts, and I didn't see how it was going to work, but it did.
Well, Sunny, I really love what you said. So in terms of you're usually the boss and now this time you weren't. So just what kinds of feelings would you say came up with that? Was it almost, I'm thinking, like for me, I'm thinking I might be a little relieved Not to have to be the boss, but how about you? Like,
Oh, yeah, kind of. It's not totally unfamiliar because I grew up in a big family. I had 4 sisters. So, you know, there was a lot of collaborating that had to happen. But it was kind of a relief. I didn't always agree with decisions that people made, and I'm sure they didn't agree with mine either. But, you know, it was a very democratic process, and majority ruled. And if the majority liked something and I didn't like it, I wasn't going to argue with it, you know. And I think everyone was pretty much like that. They went along with the majority. We weren't in love with every piece in the show, but we wanted to support each other in this venture of creating a collaborative artwork with 10 people, which is really insane when you think about it. You know, it's like
I think it's actually really impressive. It is truly impressive.
that too.
And you
I would love-
mentioned just a little what came to mind with, because this is, you know, partly under the auspices, this Zoom with the Pollock Krasner. You said that you didn't start with a theme, and it's almost like you have to trust the process, and that's how the 2 lead curators guided you to trust it, and they were also very trusting, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like Luciana and Haley weren't controlling and micromanaging, and Pollock, of course, said, the painting has a life of its own. I let it lead.
Yeah.
And
And they were good leaders. They were very good leaders in this whole process.
And sometimes you can sort of create and then kind of synthesize all the ideas. And that's what Pollock did. He would come up with a title after he made the painting, not the other way around. And
Yeah.
that's what this reminds me of. And sometimes he would also let people suggest it to him as well. So
Joyce, I'd like to add one thing real quick. You know, there was one other step before the artwork got placed in the gallery. We didn't just come in and kind of move it around. We had an actual floor plan of the space, and we physically placed the JPEGs on the floor plan so that when we came in, we had a map and a plan to work off of. So we all got together and we did that. And it's really important to come in with that plan, because you can alter it as you go and it doesn't have to stay exactly the same. But it, you know, kind of thinking about, okay, where do we want to start? Do we want to start with the larger pieces and place those first? So we did think about it in a lot of depth before we actually saw the physical works, and then we were able to edit from there.
very
I
good.
have one question. I have one more statement. I think I see the practical wisdom of picking the artwork first to be able to supply artwork. We needed to have work that was available and work that the curators liked. So there was no other way but to start with a little bit like in reverse of picking artwork that would be random choices by all of us, and then kind of put it together to find a theme within it. So it was very a practical, wise decision to start with the art first and then find a theme second, which evolved out of the choices.
Yeah, thank you, Lois. And like someone else said, it's also all of the work had in common, the quality of the work, regardless of the style. Now, as an artist, did this curatorial process inspire you in any way for your own work? Or if so, how? Or maybe it did, maybe it's sort of just a separate entity. Anyone want to speak to that? Or maybe even professionally? Sonny?
Well, this is exactly what I was going to say before, is that this process was a lot like how I work in my studio. You know, I don't pick a theme. I don't plan anything. I might choose some colors that I like, but the work just evolves on its own. And so it's interesting because my curation is the exact opposite. I'm very controlling about it. And I don't have any problem getting work when I choose a theme. That hasn't ever been a problem for me. Artists seem to have these things somehow, but You know, if I want to do a show about birds, artists always have birds, you know.
Mhm.
But it was interesting to do a curatorial process in the same way that I do my artistic process in the studio. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Anyone else? On how it inspired you as an artist or even professionally as an artist?
I don't, it hasn't, it's still going on, so I can't say if it's gonna inspire me that it would show up yet. You know what I mean? Because it's still new. But I can say that I'm in some other exhibitions right now, and it's been interesting to look at that with a different respect or understanding of how the curator chose my work, where it was hung, how they thought about it, what images they chose for Instagram and their website, and one of mine was chosen, which was cool. But like something like that, how to look at it a little differently with a little I think more, not respect, I always like, the respect is always there, but understanding, a bigger understanding. So I think it will definitely influence me professionally in that way. And maybe in the studio, to be clear about, okay, this is the work I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, and I think I already am clear about it, but something about being clearer about that.
Anyone
We'll
else?
definitely take it less personally when we get rejected from shows.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a good point of like, I think, being in a community of artists also on the East End of Long Island, where, we're all friends, we all know each other, and there might be the Springs Invitational Show and one person is chosen and someone isn't. And I feel it's really important to take joy in other people's success and not to take like a rejection personally, and just show up and be happy for somebody, even if it's not me. It's nice to be happy for myself too. But I think this program is exemplary of artists getting together and really celebrating each other and supporting each other. So we have a little bit of time for questions. If there's anyone who would like to put a question in the chat for these wonderful artists or curators or the director, anybody? Or did anyone learn anything surprising or?
Michael has his hand up, Joyce.
Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I think because I'm, oh, sorry, am I mute? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think because, because I'm host, so you can't raise my hand. I just wanted to talk to the real interesting question about how does curating a show affect your studio practice? Because that was really instrumental in why I asked Haley and Luciana to do this program. One is because I think it now you know what your gallerist has to go through. Right? Now you're really have become sensitized to the task, the enormous task that goes into mounting an exhibition and all the moving pieces and how to make it beautiful and how to make it timely and how to make it resonate is really a worthwhile lesson. The other thing I think it should do, I hope it does, is when you're in your studio, this is how I think, because I just was in a show. We make these individual works, we're thinking about how we're making works. Are you thinking, how will this be a show? Because making a show and making artwork is very, very different. And it's often left to the curator or the gallerist to make a show. And I think that's another trope I was trying to break, that I think as artists, you should seize that idea. What am I doing to make a show? What is it going to look like on the walls, right? How am I going to journey the viewer through the space? When are there small moments? When are there big moments? What needs to go online? What's the hero image? I mean, really think about what it is to put on a show. There's very few artists, and I've been at this for 30 years, that really think about that construct as they're in their studio. And when I go in as a curator and they've got that figured out, I'm like, yeah, It's like, it's like less for me to do. And the last thing I want to talk about, because I think it's an idea that's this idea, do you start with a theme and look for work, or do you like look for the work and come up with a theme? It's really both. My experience is I'm out looking all the time. It's my job to look. And usually the theme presents itself. Like I sense what's going on. It's always something in the air, right? There's always, and then I start with that idea and then I use that theme and I ask other artists to participate. But usually it's out me doing homework and traipsing around studios and think, one was during the pandemic, collage got really big. And I thought, wow, that got really big because we were living these fragmented lives and people were trying to pull it together. And every studio I went to, people were like collaging. Also, they were stuck in their kitchens, right? So they were like doing whatever they could to make work. So something, so show that work, because if you're seeing it out there, it's because it's in the air. Oh, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michael. That's a good point. Anyone else? We have one more minute. Is there someone who has a burning desire with a question or a comment or feedback, agree, disagree?
Hi.
Go ahead. Who just said hi?
Sandra Indig.
Sandra, would you like to speak, Sandra? Go ahead.
Uh,
You're muted.
Sandra, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Sandra.
Now I'm wondering if you can hear me.
You're good. Yeah, very good.
Okay. I just want to add the part that, the curator is certainly the key figure for curators, but there's also the artists. It's the artists that make the show. And I've curated many shows in my past, but I've had to do it myself, which was not that much fun, but I have a knack of being able to listen to paintings and how they communicate with each other. So, I could do it. But recently I've been entering shows because I find it very helpful for my own practice. It keeps me involved in another way, in another dimension. But I just want to thank particularly Lois Bender for being such a humanitarian that I felt appreciated, I felt listened to, I felt heard, and I felt as a result very encouraged to continue to enter exhibitions, because I do believe that it's the artists and the curators that make the exhibition. If you don't have an audience, if you don't have artists, you don't have a show. So I just want to thank those people who curators who take the artist into account as well as their product.
Mm-hmm. And your work was amazing, Sandra. So I would like to first thank Michael Gormley, the director, Luciana Solano, Haley Furba for leading this program, and the Equity Gallery and keeping it alive. So big Zoom round of applause. I'd like to thank the 10 curators who not all of them could make it tonight. So if you go on the Equity Gallery website, you'll see the names of all the curators. And I'd like to thank all of the artists who participated in the show. You could also find that at the gallery website. And I would especially like to thank Beth Barry, who actually did invite me to be in the show. It was really fun. It was really gratifying. And just meeting all these wonderful people, it was a great experience. So thank you.
Thank you,
I'd
Joyce.
like to thank Joyce for
Thank you.
Joyce.
Yes, thank you, Joyce.
Between
That was fantastic.
Pollock Krasner House and Equity Gallery. It's great to join the two together. So thank you, Joyce, for making this possible.
So we're going to sign off and have a wonderful evening or day wherever you are.